Turn Gymnastics apparel is built for big moments. Turn's roster of sponsored federations and athletes know the value of apparel that performs under pressure. From training day to finals night, Turn delivers, so athletes can too. Visit turn-gymnastics.com today and shop Turn's full range of apparel, grips, and accessories, all designed specifically for men's gymnastics. In this episode of the Sam Oldham podcast, I'm joined by Kensley Behel. She's now a friend of the show, and we're going to be previewing the European Gymnastics Championships that are taking place later this month in Leipzig. Kenley follows and covers men's gymnastics incredibly well, and I'm really excited to have her back on the show again. Kensley, just tell me, how have you been recently? There's been a lot going on in the world of gymnastics. It almost seems to me that there's too much gymnastics to follow at the moment. I don't know whether that's just a sign of the times that we're living in and all these competitions are now available online, but it just seems like there's so much coming at me, I can't even keep up with it at the moment.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's always a joy to be here. I feel similarly to you. I think definitely as a one-woman show who's covering men's gymnastics right now, it's like I cannot keep up. I cannot make enough graphics. It's so difficult. There's so much content I want to put out, and I just kind of have to pick and choose at this moment. But I think gymnastics is really interesting because we go through these seasons where it's like, we're going to have 5 or 6 major competitions. Like this weekend, we've got a World Challenge Cup, the NHK Cup, and Chinese Nationals happening this weekend. And then in a few weeks, we'll have 0 gymnastics competition. So it always seems to happen that way where they're piled up and then we're in a desert.
And what do you do, Kensley? Do you for the content that you create for everybody listening? You do an amazing job of writing articles. You have your own podcast, sharing clips and also photos online and competition results. Do you pick and prioritize? Because I'm sure you're balancing that around lots of other things. So what is it that you're looking for in terms of a competition to cover, and also just in terms of like the research? For me to sit down and the NCAA finals that have just taken place, and I'm going to ask you for your feedback from that competition. For me to sit and watch that's a good 2.5 hours of being really present and trying to digest it. And we had gone for a period for a week where my little boy Ozzy had just decided that 1 o'clock in the morning was now wake up time, and I was just sat on the stairs watching it, like in the darkness, just trying to watch this competition. How do you prioritize the events that you're covering for Neutral Deductions?
Yeah, so for this upcoming weekend, I will definitely be prioritizing the NHK Cup and Chinese Championships because they have implications towards the World Championships later this year, whereas the World Challenge Cup doesn't have implications. So I guess kind of have to look at what is part of the bigger picture and the arc of gymnastics for the season. But I do have a couple of amazing volunteers who are also willing to write articles. So this weekend, I will probably ask one of them to just look over the results that is happening at the World Challenge Cup and then just write up a quick piece about that. So we try and keep everything covered as best as possible, but it is a little bit of a juggling match.
How do you go about, organizing your calendar for the year, Kensley? Do you sit down at the start of the year and plot the big major championships and kind of work back from there? Or are you prepared that... Are you in a position where you're so prepared that you're thinking LA and then plotting backwards? How do you approach that?
So I sit down for the entire Olympic cycle, as much information as is available, and the gymtournet.com or the gymtour.net has the calendar set for the entire year, and that's really the calendar that I use, that in the FIG database. And I sort of block out these weeks of these are when the important competitions are happening, and then it is impossible as mainly a one-person organization to cover all of them without, having time to take a vacation and be with my family. So there are things that I prioritize going to. For example, the European Championships, I will be going to Leipzig there. And then I had also considered going to the World University Games, which are also in Germany. I lived in Germany for several years. They speak German. So going to competitions in Germany feels really good for me. But I had to pick and choose one. So I picked European Championships.
And then let's go to the NCAA finals, Kensley. Am I right in thinking that the last time I spoke with you, you went to the NCAA finals because they were in Michigan, right? And just tell me about what the big takeaways from that competition were. For me watching again, and I've said this over the past year, I think, I'm really impressed and blown away by the depth that you have over there in the US. It's so interesting how the landscape of gymnastics changes. And, you had a team in the men's gymnastics team in the US for a long period of time that would always struggle with pommel horse. Now you're producing the best pommel horse workers in the world, it seems. Over in Great Britain, we're always amazing on pommel horse. Now we seem to be producing the best floor and vault workers. So it's really interesting how things shift. Just tell me what your big takeaways were from that weekend, being there in Michigan. It was very exciting, even for somebody that maybe doesn't have a real deep understanding of the college system. The way that they set the competition up and the format, as a viewer to watch on a screen, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really exciting, and obviously for it to go right down to the last routines was brilliant. And I'm sure that the college system in the US, who, constantly is a real battle, right, to hold on to those men's gymnastics programs, was super happy with the way it played out. Just tell me what your big takeaways were from the weekend.
Yeah, so I was there in person. Was my alma mater's, so I wanted to go back for sure. But I actually got picked up by ESPN, which is one of the major sports broadcasting systems. And I was working behind the scenes with ESPN, sort of crunching numbers and doing data for them. So for the competition itself, in qualifications, there were no real surprises. The 6 teams who were expected to get through to finals, they did get through to finals. Finals was fascinating because there was a lot of teams switching back and forth. And part of that was depending on which event that they started on. So Nebraska started on vault. And so they came right out of the gates in first place after the first rotation. And throughout the competition, it quickly became clear that it was only going to come down to Michigan and to Stanford, which is what a lot of people had predicted. And as you alluded to, it really came down to stuck landings and the final routine. So Stanford came into the competition with about a 4 points difficulty advantage over Michigan, but Michigan just out-executed them. And they stuck more landings, which is really like a 2/10 swing, right?
Okay.
When they stick those landings because of the stick bonus. And in the end, Paul Judo was up to go do the final vault for Michigan. And it was really, really, really controversial. Did you actually see that final vault?
I watched it, yeah. I watched all of the routines. I saw that final vault. What was the controversy? Because I watched the final vault. I'd known that Michigan had won because I'd seen it on social media, and then I kind of turned it off. So was the controversy, about whether he stepped over the line, the out-of-bounds line? Was it that?
Right. So when he landed, he had the 1/10 deduction for being out of bounds with 1 foot.
Okay.
Then he clicked his heels together to finish the routine. And on the heel click, he ended up putting both heels out of bounds. So then the question became, when does the routine end? And the line judge indicated it was only a 1/10 deduction. So that was actually the difference in the meet. And there has been all sorts of questions, and I would love to talk to Andy Toombs about this actually to get his take from the MTC of when does the routine end, and does the heel click actually, like, can you get a deduction for that? So there in the NCAA, you cannot inquire another team's routine or score. You can only inquire your own.
Right.
And this has been another sort of sticking point for this season because there have been several judging issues and errors where people have said, hey, we need to be able to inquire that because this kid got 9/10 extra of difficulty on floor that literally did not exist in their routine. And the judges actually, or the coaches just actually had a vote to say, like, can we inquire or not? And actually the coaches voted to turn it down, which I find very interesting considering all of the amount of controversy that's happened this season.
And I have seen that. I've seen that there's been a lot of controversy around teams winning and the scores that they got. I think there was another incident with Michigan, is that right? Where there was real controversy around. That's really interesting that obviously they voted against that. And, you saying that there was 9/10 in difficulty. I mean, 1/10 I can understand, but 9/10, that's wild. What was the general consensus following, now we're at the end of that season? Was it that it was a lack of judging expertise in those situations? Was it done on purpose. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you're
Yeah.
being over there, and you will have a general idea of what the feeling is in terms of what's enabled that to, because that's not good for the sport, is it? I'm thinking back, me and Sam have been looking at a load of older VHS tapes, and we found one that was the Athens Olympic high bar final, and we're kind of like, we're looking at it and we're like, oh my God, if you were the FIG when this happened, you'd have been like, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. So you don't want that to overshadow a gymnastics competition.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of things that could have potentially contributed that. So this was not at the NCAA championships, just to clarify for those who are casually listening. This was a meet that had happened earlier in the season. So the gymnast who went up on floor, his difficulty score should have been a 5.0, and he was awarded a 5.9. So there is this idea that potentially the judge fat-fingered the input system, and instead of hitting 5.0, accidentally hit the 9. And so this is where I think judges they're set up to fail, right? Because they can know, oh my God, I have put in the wrong score by accident. There's nothing they can do to fix it in those style of meets. It would have had to have been the Michigan coaches to inquire that score. But there was another pommel horse score for Nebraska later in the meet where the gymnast was awarded 6/10 in difficulty, and there was no way that you can argue that that was fat-fingered. Okay. So that you have to think was potentially just struggles and difficulties with the new code of points. And in the U.S., I don't know if it's the same in Great Britain, but there are different levels of judges, right? Yep. We have the brevet judges who are extraordinary, who, especially at the highest levels, have incredible levels of training. And in the U.S., we have a couple people either who are on the men's technical committee or who have judged Olympics, and so they really know what they're talking about. But then you have nationally rated judges, which is what I used to be, and that's an open book test that you could take online. Okay. And so the difference in preparation, right, is extraordinary. And so at this meet, these level of judges were national judges, so they would have gotten their certification through an open book test. And it doesn't mean that there aren't extraordinary national judges. There absolutely are, but it is just a little bit of difference in testing and preparation. And
I guess the challenge there is because the college system is already a system that needs all the help that they can get, that these judges are volunteering their time, and we need them, and you as a team want to have as many judges as you can on your team. It's very interesting. We have a similar thing in it. So I was a national level judge. I need to retake it for this cycle if I want to. It is relatively strict. You have to go to the course in person, and you spend 3 days doing the course. And it was pretty challenging, to be honest. I think I had to look through like 60 routines. I had to go through and give D score and E score on 60 routines and have to be within a margin of error. I think I would be surprised in the UK if there were big mistakes in difficulty scores at a big competition, because they get picked up pretty quickly. But again, we don't have a college system like you guys, and so maybe at those lower level competitions that we have, those mistakes aren't being highlighted, or certainly not being caught on camera. But very interesting in the way it came down, but super exciting, I think, for everybody there. It seems like, again, Frederick Richard can't really do any wrong at the moment. He's really, he's the man of the moment in those situations. He's putting himself under a lot of pressure, I would say, and taking on a big responsibility and trying to do lots of creative, cool things. And he's still hitting. And I'm sure his agency were seeing dollar signs when he was when the team won and he won the individual all around. And it's brilliant to see that Michigan have won. I think that was the first time since 2014. Is that right?
Yeah, so when I was the manager for the team and the competition was back at Michigan, that was the last time they had won. So what was really cool was the majority of that 2014 team was actually there to watch. And so while everyone else was watching the current Michigan gymnasts to look for their reaction, I actually had a video camera on the 2014 team to watch their reaction, watch the team win for the first time since they won. So it was a really special moment. And you always want athletes to leave the competition thinking that they won fairly, or you don't want other teams thinking that they were wronged. And I'm not sure that there is that level of like solace for Stanford. I think a lot of the people on the Stanford team feel that the wrong call was made and that they should have made history by winning that 6 in a row. And I am still looking for like kind of that official answers, because some judges are telling me, no, the right call was made, and other judges are telling me, no, the routine isn't in and you can get the deduction for the heel click. So I'm still looking for that, was the right call made sort of finality.
Very interesting, because I wouldn't know the answer for that. And it seems like that might be one of those kind of 1 in a million situations where the rule becomes very blurred and grey and no one quite knows. So it'll be interesting to know from maybe Andy Toombs what is the technical answer, because there will be one. And if not, I'm sure that one will be written into the code of points very, very quickly to make sure that that doesn't happen at an event like the European Championships where you're going. Just before we get onto the Europeans, Kensley, as a fan and a spectator, how has the new code of points and the rules impacted your experience of watching men's gymnastics so far?
I have loved it. I can really only speak to a lot of what we experienced with NCAA championships, but the meet went by so much more quickly than previous meets. The shorter routines, and then in that format, they're only using 4 up, 4 count. And like some of these meets would just drag on for, like 3 hours. And to be out of that meet in 1 hour and 45 minutes, it was glorious. I love gymnastics, but sitting in those seats for quite such a long time is a little difficult. I also feel like we're seeing more high level skills. Again, majority I've seen is the NCAA season, and you've got Cameron Nelson doing 2 triple backs in a floor routine, right? That's spectacular.
Yeah.
When have we ever seen that before? So I'm very much looking forward to this code of points. I want to throw the question back to you. How do you see it unfolding, and how are you enjoying it or disliking it?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, Kensley. I think it's interesting, right? Like with the sticking bonus, you guys were doing that over there in college gymnastics for a long time. So not much has really changed there, but I think it's really added an element to the routines. From the gymnastics that I've seen live so far this year at the British Championships, and then the videos that I've watched online, I think you're right in that the quality of the depth and the level is just increasing all of the time. I think you're seeing quality gymnastics from so many countries. And I think even the teams that maybe in the past have had 1 specialist, all of a sudden they've got 2 or 3. And I think it's going to make everybody even more competitive. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out in like a major championships team competition in that environment, and what that looks like, and the makeup of the team and the best makeup of a team for this code of points. Because I think dropping to 8 skills, the strategy and the tactics in a team final situation where everybody's closer might play out differently on each apparatus. On the apparatus where you typically take a lot of risk, it's going to be interesting to see how much risk people are going to take. But it does seem to me like people are naturally, in the sport of gymnastics, people are always going to try and cram as much difficulty in as they possibly can. I think the way in which that they've upgraded certain skills means that we're seeing, like, I always felt in the past that the specialists would do the highest level of gymnastics, like individual skills possible. And when you start to see that filter through to the all-arounders, like, then you're like, oh, okay, this level is going super high. So when, there was a period of time, I'd say probably around 2014, and the cycle between 2012 to 2016, where it started to become quite commonplace to see all-arounders doing dragolescus or triple twists, like all-arounders, and seeing all-arounders do those vaults, whereas previously you would only really see those vaults from a specialist. You wouldn't really see it from the all-arounders. And I think a good marker of the level of gymnastics going up is the difficulty that the top all-rounders are able to do, and how competitive they are with specialists. That's one thing that quite a few athletes have said to me. They think that a lot more of the all-rounders will start being competitive with the specialists, because for specialists now being reduced to 8 skills, they don't have that buffer of having the time to train 10 incredibly hard skills. It's just 8, and the all-rounders actually will adapt to that quite easily. So that's been quite interesting to hear other athletes say that, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think the focus will become more on the all-arounders again, because if the all-arounders are starting to be able to take medals in the apparatus finals, then it's all going to be about, well, can you potentially do a Vitaly Sherbo and win an all-around gold and then 4 apparatus golds? So yeah, it would have been interesting, right, to see Kohei Uchimura compete under 8 skills, and then how much is that difference there between the specialists taken away? Because there was a World Championships, I think, was it 2011, where he made a lot of apparatus finals, but wasn't able to compete with a lot of the best gymnasts in the world on those apparatus finals because he had to try and add in difficulty and skills he'd probably never competed before to be competitive. Whereas at 8 skills, he would have been competitive with those the best specialists on those apparatus. So for me, it's been great to watch because I like exciting gymnastics. As a gymnast myself, I was always a gymnast that was taking big risks. So to see dismounts and the gymnasts, I think, that have the right balance of execution and style mixed with an incredible spatial awareness and ability to perform skills and know where they are in the air are going to do very, very well in this code of points. And I think that will also help maybe some big names like Frederick Richard be born, because it will be exciting and you'll be able to attach, it's not just the performance, it's also the personality. Like someone like Fabian would have loved this code of points. Because he would, he'd go to competitions and play sticking games with himself. And so for him, it would have been amazing to have like a stick bonus. So yeah, I think for me, it's been great. I think it's brilliant for spectators, super exciting. And if me as a gymnastics fan, I think it's exciting to watch, then you would hope that translates to the general public that just tune in twice a year maybe to watch the Olympics or the World Championships.
Yeah, I think for me, my only complaint thus far with the new changes is I really miss the stuck triple twist at the end of floor routines. I just aesthetically, I don't prefer the double flipping elements to end that floor routine. Like, I just loved the triple twist and the stick, but I mean, that's a very minimal thing to dislike about a code of points.
I always enjoy trying to predict what will become like the standard dismount or the standard routine. And I think with floor, you're going to see a lot of people in the beginning switch from triple twist to a double pike just to get their bearings with finishing on a double somersault and maybe adding in a round-off flick instead of just doing it from a round-off. But that will develop into gymnasts finishing on double tuck. I think that's what you're going to see from most people. So, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that, again, the top level all-arounders are going to finish their floor routine with a double-double, I'd have been like, well, I'm going to retire right now because the stamina and endurance you need to be able to do that is through the roof. But yeah, I think we'll get, hopefully, I'm hoping we get a real variety of skills. I'm already seeing a lot of gymnasts doing Cassinas and Lukins, and not just one or the other. They're already starting to try and almost become an expert in not just one family of skills, but multiple families of skills, which is really, really cool to see. Okay, let's look ahead at the European Championships then, Kensley. Let's start with the team. Ukraine will be defending, but they're going to be without Illia Kovtun.
And they may be without a team, actually.
Okay.
So I just recorded and released a podcast about everything that has been happening in Ukraine since 2020. And there is a lot of interpersonal struggle that's happening with the coaches and the head of the program and the vice president. And Nazar Chipurny recently released a statement by the athletes of the Ukrainian Federation that said, if you do not unsuspend our head coach, we will not compete at the European Championships.
Wow.
So we are all sort of watching this currently to see if they are even going to field a team.
And who is the head national coach? Is that Oleg's coach?
Sartensky, Gennady Sartensky.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting. And what's the confrontation between the head coach and the federation? Do you know much about what that is all around?
It's a little unclear. There are allegations on all sides, and so I don't feel comfortable officially stating like I know what it is, but he has been suspended since February.
Okay.
The athletes feel like his suspension is unwarranted.
Right.
And they have said, unless you give us our coach back, we are not going to the European Championships. And right now, I believe the national team roster in Ukraine is under 10. It's quite small, dilapidated due to people leaving, due to people retiring, due to injuries. And so there aren't a lot of backups. Whereas in the US, if the athletes came together and said, we're not competing, the US delegation could, technically potentially just field a whole set of other athletes from behind. There is not that depth in Ukraine. So that's just something to really keep an eye on.
Yeah, and you hope that, obviously Illia Kovtun leaving, you would imagine has got something to do with this, because if he was happy, he would have stayed, right? And I'm thinking back to post-2012 with Nikolai Kuksenkov leaving and going to Russia, and then Oleg Stepko leaving and going to Azerbaijan. You hope it doesn't then maybe start a mass exodus of people just leaving. And Ukraine have been such a strong team over the past 3 Olympic cycles. As soon as you lose one gymnast, sometimes it can start a bit of a domino effect. And that would be very sad, because I do enjoy watching Ukrainian gymnastics. They've got a long tradition and a long history. You go back to the 90s watching gymnasts like Korobchinsky, even Rustam Sharapov. I trained with 2 Ukrainian gymnasts myself when I was between the age of 16 up until the age of about 20. And that style of Ukrainian gymnastics is amazing. I'm thinking back again, we watched that VHS tape, and Valery Goncharov came on the screen, parallel bars, high bar, just, they do have that long, rich tradition and history of very technical gymnastics. I remember, I don't know his name, Kensley, you will know, watching the European Championships last year, there was the young Ukrainian gymnast who I was super impressed with. I think we spoke about it at the time. I'm not sure whether he's going to be in the team if they do compete, because I was looking forward to watching his gymnastics, and I think he was 18. I was super impressed with his style.
Was it Radomir Stelmach?
Maybe, that rings a bell. Quite a slender, slight gymnast, very stylish, really good on high. I saw him on high bar, parallel bars, maybe pommel horse. That would be a real shame if they missed out, because they would be the defending team champions. Okay, let's move on from Ukraine then. So one team that's definitely going to be there is the GB team. It's a new look GB team in many ways. Again, a bit of a changing of the guard with Max retiring. James Hall isn't going to be there. So it is kind of a new team. Quite an experienced team in many ways now, even though they are quite young. Even Jamie Lewis, the British champion, he's kind of come in and just had a standout year. In many ways, come out of nowhere. He's inexperienced in terms of senior major championships, but was very experienced as a junior gymnast. I think that's one thing that a lot of people didn't maybe know about Jamie's story, because he struggled for the past few years for a number of reasons, is that he's won the most junior European medals ever by a British gymnast. And in that lineup, you have Niall Wilson, Max Whitlock, Dan Keaton. So that in itself is an incredible achievement. So he has that talent and that pedigree there. And it looks like he's starting to really reach his full potential. And then you've got Jake, Harry, Luke, Jonas, Courtney as the individual. Like a very, very interesting team, strong team, incredibly strong on floor. They're literally 3 of the world's best floor workers there. Very competitive on vault, rings, you would argue as well, although I imagine Courtney's going to be taking that individual spot. So what are your expectations of the British team, Kensley, going into this European Championships, and do you think they are the firm favourites considering the disruptions with the Ukrainian team?
Based on what we know right now, I think the British are the favorites for the gold. It's a little bit hard to tell because all we have right now is the nominative roster. And as of today, May 13th, there's only 5 teams that have officially been confirmed. One of the major teams that I'm looking at to maybe challenge the British would be the Italian team. But we don't know exactly who's going to be on that team. We just have that nominative roster. Jamie has been a very pleasant surprise for me this year. He actually, I don't know if you know this, is leading the all-around standings in terms of European all-around results this year. The only person who's outscored him is a gymnast from Russia. Okay. Now, there are a handful of Asian gymnasts who have been scoring 84, 85, but his 82.25 from English Championships is up there. So he should definitely be in that conversation for the all-around podium. I think in terms of just the shape of the team. It's interesting because you have Jake, who is sitting out a couple of events this year, and you would typically expect him in the all around. So I'm interested to see if him sort of taking a break from competing. I think is it high bar and still rings he's taking a break from right now, to see how he is able to perform on like pommel horse. Because if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have been like, Jake Jarmin, pommel horse worker, like absolutely not. But he's really, really improved there. It's actually a beautiful routine. Of course, his work on floor and vault is top of the world. And then, something I'm really looking forward to is to see, can Luke Whitehouse get that 3 in a row? Because I don't think it's ever been done. And so not to put any pressure on him, I'm sure he has enough pressure on himself, but I love those history making moments. And, Courtney being back, having that 8 skills we talked about, what's the benefit? I love Courtney's gymnastics. I think he's beautiful and powerful, and just, I can't wait to see him on still rings and see what he can do with this new routine.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think with Jake taking that break from those other 2 apparatus, he's looked at it and thought, well, how can I be competitive in an all-around situation in LA 2028? Well, I'm going to have to improve some of my weaker events. And I think what you might see in this cycle, and what the goal will be for Jake, is where he would go up and be the anchor of the team, so the first guy to go on pommels and the first guy to go on high bar. You might start to see him creep further down that lineup, so he might be the second guy, that middle score, and I think that's definitely going to be a personal goal of his, to not just be the guy that we put up to do a very safe routine on the high bar. We know he's going to do 2 Kachev skills, catch it and do a nice clean routine. No, can I actually be the guy that goes up and maybe does one of the most difficult routines we've got, because I'm trying to push the all around. So I think that from chatting to him earlier in the year, that's probably his plan and what he wants to do. I think it's going to be really, really interesting in that qualification event to see which of the 3 qualify into the floor final, if they do, because they all do very difficult routines. And one thing that stood out for me from the British Championships, and speaking to the new national coach, was that they all seem to be struggling, and a lot of the floor workers are struggling, putting that big combination tumble towards the end when they're fatigued, because it requires so much technique that it's very, very difficult to do when they're already struggling at the end of their routine with their cardio or the lactic acid in their legs, to get that technique right and be patient in those skills. Because what often happens is they come out, and instead of waiting to hit the floor and then use the floor and be tight in their body, they come out a bit too early and they're a bit soft. They lose their hips and then they sit down that double front. So you saw that in the British, and Luke came out on top, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. One thing that I have noticed in training footage of Harry is that I think he used the British Championships, we spoke about Harry last year being very strategic about which competitions he went to. And I think he went to the British Championships. He performed very well, but I think he learned a lot, probably more than a lot of the other gymnasts. And straight away the next week, I saw him training triple back, ready for rings. I saw him doing triple double on floor, ready for floor. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what routines Harry performs, because he was already talking about potentially upgrading his vault to a handspring triple twist at the British. And the reason he didn't try it was because he had to go straight from rings to vault. So it'll be really interesting to see the gymnastics Harry does. And I think one thing that the British gymnasts always do very well is that because we're in the advantageous position of being very close in terms of logistically, the guys are within, all of the guys in that team, off the top of my head, are within about a 2-hour drive from each other. That means that they can train at the National Centre in the lead up to a European Championships for 5-6 weeks. And they can go there on a Monday and drive home on a Thursday and get a weekend at home. So they get so much good gymnastics training done in those 5-6 weeks that they can improve even in those 5 or 6 weeks. So it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out at the European Championships. But I'm excited. Like you said, I think you're going to see lots of exciting gymnastics, and it'll be really cool to see how Jonas Rushworth does on the international stage, because he does really beautiful gymnastics, very exciting, interesting gymnastics.
Yeah, and it's interesting you specifically mentioned floor. Harry Hepworth has tied with Cam Nelson, done the highest difficulty floor routine of anyone in the world this year. But he's done several different routines. He's done a 5.8. He's done a 6.1. I think he did a 6.2. Jake Jarmin, I think, has done a 6.1. So they are leading the world, even above someone like Artem Dolgopiat in difficulty, or can. But just because they can doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly what we will see at the European Championships.
And Kensley, do you expect the Italian team to be that team that pushes Great Britain and Ukraine if they have a full team there? I know that they did very well at the last European Championships, and they seem to be consistently improving. And again, when I see their gymnastics, I see that there are definitely the reminiscence of Soviet-style gymnastics approaches in the style of gymnastics the Italians are doing. And I know that there are a lot of ex-Soviet coaches, particularly Russian coaches, based in Italy, working in Italy, and you can see that, I think, in the gymnastics that they're starting to do. I think if you go back 15 years ago, Italian gymnastics probably had a look to it, and now it's very different for me. I know the Italian women, same thing. They've got a lot of Eastern European coaches over there. So that influx of that knowledge is certainly now paying dividends, and you can see it in the style of gymnastics that they're doing, and they're very, very competitive. So how do you expect them to perform as a team this time around, Kensley?
I expect the Italian team to be particularly strong. They're also a group of athletes who have the option to perform more often before the European Championships in their Italian series. So most people can go to the World Cups or to a World Challenge Cup. They aren't competing quite as often. So getting to learn and practice their routines, and how is this new code working, and how are the judges interpreting these rules? Because even though the judges can go to these courses and bring back information, there always end up being surprises at competitions. I mean, jump back to the US at the Olympics. The men's judge for the high bar on the men's technical committee is American, and the U.S. athletes were still caught off guard by how they were going to be judging those layout Tkachevs. So all that to say, the more you're able to compete earlier in an Olympic cycle and get that feedback for how judges are interpreting the rules, I think the better. So I think the Italians are going to come out very strong and probably be most likely to challenge the British. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Ukrainian team, even if they send a team, I don't think that they're going to be challenging. If I was to pick kind of that third and fourth team that I think is looking for the podium, I think it's probably the Swiss team and the Turkish team. The Turkish team is, as again, on the nominative roster, we haven't had it confirmed, but almost identical to the team that was sent to the Olympics. It's a very strong team. They're just a little hit or miss. Yeah. And then the Swiss team also looked quite good at their Olympic or their European trials. And I think that they should be considered as one of the favorites for that bronze spot.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I think I'm unsure, and it's not very clear where the rest of those teams all sit in the pecking order as we go into this new Olympic cycle. And you typically within the world, right? But within Europe, it kind of shifts and it moves around. You know, you might have a cycle or a couple of years where the Netherlands are quite strong, and then Germany are quite strong. The French team's pretty strong, the Italian team, and it kind of moves a bit. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think there's a lot of young talent that's going to come through in this cycle, and I'm excited to see it. I know the gymnast that just won the French nationals, he's very exciting. It's really, really exciting gymnastics, particularly on floor. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, but I agree with you that, for me, if the Ukrainians have a team, that experience that they've got in there, depending on the coaching setup that maybe is going to be there at the Europeans, that will play a role, and they'll maybe end up fighting for third if they get into that team final. And if it's free to count, their experience might play a role, particularly Oleg's, right? But I think you're going to probably have GB and Italy battling it out there, but it could be for somebody like Turkey that do have those incredibly strong routines on quite a few of the events. They maybe just have a few more weak spots than those top teams. When I was looking at the GB team, I thought maybe there is a routine on say pommels, maybe one on P-bar, one on high bar that's a little bit weaker, but everywhere else I think they're pretty strong. It's interesting that you picked up on some of the gymnasts doing lots of different routines. I think that is probably just an accurate representation of people not being completely comfortable with the routines that they are training, and they're just trying to find out the best way for them to get to that highest difficulty score. We saw that, I think, we had Eddie Penev on the podcast recently, same thing. He tried different routines at every single World Cup. He did well again over the past few weekends, so it seems to be finding the routine that works for him. But you spoke about Harry. I think it is just in that new code, it's finding out what's the best routine for me and my gymnastics.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to play off of that you just said. There are some exceptional juniors turned senior, and you predicted this when we spoke last year, that you thought because of the seniors moving down to the 8 skills, that you thought it would be a lot easier for the juniors to make that leap. And just two that I really want to highlight who I think are really going to be some of the future of men's gymnastics is Anthony Mansard from France. So he won the all-around in Rimini, and his won, I want to say 7 or 8 junior European championships medals. These juniors are really technically beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They have, that toe point that you want, the long lines, the extension. Yeah. And a lot of the juniors turning senior actually do a lot better with that scale on floor than a lot of the seniors do. So those are maybe some of the gymnasts that you want to be emulating. And then the other one is Hamlet Manoukian from Armenia. Armenia is actually sending, I don't want to say unusually strong, but it's a very, very strong team that could surprise. Yeah. And Manoukian has won, I think he won 3 golds in the World Cup Series on pommel horse and ended up taking the entire series title. So those are 2 of the youngsters to certainly watch.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, in the past, typically, given the area of the world that they're from in Armenia, they traditionally, you have Albert Azarian, right? One of the greatest rings workers of all time is from there. They have the right mix of genes between European strength and then the physical makeup of the gymnasts that are based over close to them in Asia, China, and Japan. And that together it makes incredible rings workers, and it's now producing incredible pommel horse workers. And you can only imagine that it will be a matter of time until they find a gymnast that's great on high bar, and they find a gymnast that's great on parallel bars. They have Davtyan on vault. Quite easily in 4 years' time, they could be a team that's challenging in team events. They might be the Turkey of the last cycle. They might be similar this time around. So, yeah, very exciting and great that you've highlighted those 2 juniors that are coming up. I'm keeping my eye on them as well. And again, Hamlet, we're going to talk about him when we get to pommel horse. Let's move on to the all-around. We've got Marius from Cyprus, who is defending. And he's one of 4 gymnasts that are defending the individual events. So particularly the all-around. What do you expect from him? Who do you expect to challenge him? I've highlighted the experience of Oleg if he's going to do 6 apparatus. I think he was second last time around. We've got Aberdini from Italy. Again, I'm expecting if he's competing to be challenging. He seems to just be getting better all the time. It would have been great to see Jake. You highlighted that Jamie has actually got the highest score outside of Japan, China, and Russia, who won't be competing. So what are your expectations in the all-around competition, Kensley?
Oh, I would say that it's been one of the harder ones to predict because there just haven't been a lot of all-around competitions to sort of see how people are doing on all 6 apparatus. And then also you have people like Jake Jarmin, who you would assume would be maybe top of the podium, and then he's taking a break from 2 events. And so it's a little hard to say, well, who's competing all around right now? Because it is, an event specialist world championship. I mean, there is an all around, but it's mainly about the event guys. And with the format, there's really only room on teams for like 1 all-arounder, maybe 2 if you're Japan. Yeah. So all that to say, the people I'm kind of keeping my eye on, but again, find it hard to predict, are Adema Sil put up an all-around score earlier this year with an 80.950. Lorenzo Casali, again, with DTB Pokal, put up an 81. And then Leo Saladino, he put it up an 81.45 at the French Championships. And so it sort of seems like in Europe right now, with the pool that is currently competing, you're maybe looking for a winning score of like mid 82 to 83s. And anyone who can sort of get into that range will likely medal there.
Yeah, I think my expectations are that I think, again, like I said, Marius will be defending. So if he's competing all six, I think he'll be there and in the mix. I'd also, an outside bet for me would be maybe Milad Karimi from Kazakhstan. If he's going to do six pieces, he's doing very, very well. I mean, the gymnastics that he's doing on floor and high bar is incredible. So if he can put together a consistent six-piece competition, I think he'll probably be up there. I think he's been knocking on the door for the past few years, and now he has that experience and is maybe, you know, I know that his coach is an incredibly experienced coach that's worked with some of the best gymnasts in the world, right? Ivan Ivankov and the Australian team for a long time. He was then, I think, he'd worked with Sherbo because he was based out of Belarus. So he's got a lot of experience, and his gymnastics at the moment in those World Cups on high bar, like the difficulty of his high bar routine and consistency of it is amazing. And similarly to floor, so I think he might be there in contention if he's doing six apparatus.
I completely agree with you. And he is someone that I had actually like slipped my mind because of the World Cup series. And I've just been watching how well he's been doing on floor and on high bar. And so in my mind, I had not thought of him as maybe competing all around this year. But I think you're 100% correct that if he is competing all around, he is going to, like, this could be his breakthrough year.
And maybe the advantage he might have, and I'm going to ask you to explain this in a moment, Kensley, if you can, is that, he's very good on high bar, very good on floor, and has a good routine on parallel bars. So he would potentially, if he was from one of those bigger teams, qualify for the mixed team event. He probably won't go on to do that because I don't know if the Kazakhstan team have a full women's team or not, or have somebody that can compete on those events that would be competitive. So he might then take that break. They won't be in the team final, and he'll be fresh going into the all-around final where someone from the bigger nations might end up being in that mixed team event. So can you explain what that mixed team event is, Kensley? It's the first time it's going to take place at the Europeans. It's going to be an event that will be in LA 2028. So can you just tell us about the events that the men will do, the events that the women will do, and what adds up to that final score, and ultimately that team taking the gold medal for their country?
Yeah, how exciting that we get to witness history and see a new gymnastics event that's going to take place. So the way that the mixed team competition works is delegations don't get to decide who is competing in the mixed team cup. So everything is determined from qualification. So women's qualifications are on Monday. Men's qualifications are on Tuesday. Mixed team cup is on Wednesday. So for the men specifically, it's the best combination of floor, parallel bar, and high bar. So let's take the British team, for example. I think the only two athletes who are probably even going to be eligible for that are Jamie and maybe Luke if he's doing all around, but I don't know if he is actually going to compete all events in qualification. So it's whichever of those athletes has that highest combined score from those three events, floor, parallel bar, and high bar. And then they are going to be matched with their fellow teammate from the women's side who has the best combined score of vault, balance beam, and floor exercise. So athletes cannot be replaced by their federation. They earn that spot for themselves. And then if any athlete has to withdraw due to injury or illness or anything like that, my understanding is they don't actually get replaced by a fellow like British gymnast. That British team would just be out of that competition and it would go to the next spot. So there are 3 rounds that happen in the final, and you can compete any of the events of those 3 or 6 events in whichever round that you want. But if you are wanting to do vault as a woman, in the last round, you have to compete 2 vaults.
Right.
So it is a little complicated, so I hope I'm doing a good job explaining this. So in round 1, there are going to be 16 teams. Then after the first round, 8 of those teams are eliminated, the 8 combined lowest scoring team. And then in round 2 of the 8 remaining teams, you have to pick an event from the one that you didn't do in the first round. And then again, it's cut in half. So those 4 teams are eliminated. And then it goes into the medal rounds for gold, silver. So teams 1 and 2 compete for gold and silver, and then teams 3 and 4 compete for bronze. So it's it's a lot.
Yeah.
If you go to one of those Swiss money meets, I'm trying to remember if it's Swiss Cup.
It's the Swiss Cup, because I competed in that event. So it's very similar. I'm wondering whether, because the FIG is based in Switzerland, how much that had to do with them incorporating that into the European Championships. But yeah, it is exciting. It's great for the athletes. It's really interesting because it becomes very strategic. Because you don't want to necessarily do your best event in the first round, because you want to save that for the final, but you also need to make sure that you get through to the next round. So it really becomes a question of, okay, what's the best? You almost have to really look at your competitors and see who you're competing against. And yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Those athletes that compete in that mixed team, Kensley, are they then free to compete in all the events after that? So potentially you could have a gymnast doing qualification, mixed team, all around, team final, and apparatus.
Yeah. So
Wow.
if, again, with looking at the British team, my guess is that Jamie would probably get that spot on the men's side. I think he will probably also make all-around final. So if that happens, you've got him competing Tuesday qualifications, Wednesday mixed team cup, Thursday all-around final, and then Friday and Saturday are the event finals, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that's, if he made any of those, like, that's a really grueling ask of an athlete.
Yeah, you almost want to be in a really competitive team where the load is going to be spread out a little bit more. And maybe if you're in a team that's middle of the pack, but you are a real top all-arounder, you might end up having to compete in so many of those competitions. Potentially, just thinking there from what you've said, actually, depending on the apparatus that he does, maybe somebody like, whether they would use him. And I think this comes down to the format, right? We don't really know who's going to do all around, and I'm sure that I could ask a few people and have a good idea. But if, for example, because Jonas is very strong on parallel bars and high bar, so they might look to put him on floor in qualification to save somebody else as energy for the all-around final, if that makes sense. I don't know how they'd go about that, but it'll be really interesting to see what they do in terms of tactics. If they're thinking but Jamie would have to do 6 pieces. You can't really do that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
you can't do that because you've got to do Harry, Luke, Jake on floor, and you want to give Jamie that shot at the all-around.
Yeah. Right, it's super interesting. I mean, it's great for the athletes, right? They've got another chance at winning a medal, so that's amazing. And those medals mean so much, for those athletes that are trying to get funding. That's huge for them. So another opportunity to get a medal. And, I can see what they're doing. And I think it's smart, bringing in the women's gymnastics fan base to the men's and trying to feed off that and ride on those coattails is a really smart thing to do. So it'll be great to see how that all unfolds. Let's move on to the apparatus finals then, Kensley. Let's do floor and pommels, and maybe just give me your top 2 picks on those 2 apparatus. I think with floor, we've got to talk about Luke, right? He's going for the 3rd in a row on an apparatus that's incredibly difficult to be consistent on, and he does a very difficult routine. So I think, traditionally speaking, he's defending. Luke is one of the 3 apparatus that's defending his title. Artem is going to be there, right? You would expect those 2 to be battling it out, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other people within that mix. Jake and Harry both have the difficulty to be up there winning the gold medal for sure. Are they the 2 gymnasts you would expect on floor to be battling it out, Kensley?
I think so. There are, again, Artem Dolgopyat, Luke Whitehouse, like you mentioned, Milad Karimi. The highest score actually to date has been for someone who could compete is actually, I think he would actually compete at Asian Championships. So I'm going to scratch that for a second. But yeah, those 3, I think, are probably going to be the favorites for the floor exercise.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm really excited to see if Luke can do it. You would say that there's that pressure, but at this point, having won 2 golds, I think the pressure is going to be the pressure that he's probably putting on himself, and that expectation. And I don't know that, I'm pretty sure that nobody's won 3 back-to-back on floor. Certainly nobody's ever done that for Great Britain, winning an Apparatus. Yeah, I can't remember that happening. Winning 3 back-to-back gold medals, so that would be amazing. Let's move on to pommels then. We spoke about him a little bit before. He's kind of cleaning up at the moment. What do you like about his gymnastics and his routine? And maybe, Kensley, what do you think the likes of Rhys McClenaghan might be thinking as he looks ahead to the rest of this cycle? Do you think he's going to be looking at him and thinking, wow, he's going to really challenge me in the next 4 years?
I think that when Rhys looks at other athletes, he simply looks at what they do and says, how can I do it better? And then figures out how to do it better. I think like Luke and he are so level-headed, and they are so willing to dig in and do that really hard, boring work that he talked about on your podcast, that I mean, maybe that will be exciting for him to see a new and an up-and-comer, someone that's different to compete against. But I just think him and Luke are going to look and say, like, what does he do really well, and how can I do that better, and figure it out and just do it.
Yeah, one thing that's been quite interesting, and I saw Rhys training this when we were there in Ireland, he's switching to doing a Makulak, right? And he's trying to do it almost like he's going all the way to handstand. He's already trying to do it and, like, take it to the extreme and do it as perfectly as possible. But, you know, it must be great for Sam seeing everybody switching from doing, you know, I know it's very popular in the US, but like everybody now is switching to doing a scissors from the end because they just don't want to risk those deductions, and it makes sense. And Hamlet obviously does it incredibly well, and his routine is, you know, he's got that, it almost looks very Zhao Quinn-esque, his circle shape, right? And so it's going to be really, I mean, pommels, I think, is probably going to be one of the most competitive apparatus over the next, and like, how do you, I think the expectation from now on will be the kind of routine and the example reset at Paris is execution just has to be beautiful and your shape has to be outstretched, because I don't think you can get away with, on 8 skills, being able to build your difficulty enough that you can just bypass the execution deductions from not having a straight circle shape.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one of the things that I noticed most when I first saw Hamlet Manukian, and then also I'm going to talk about Gabriele Targetta from Italy, is their extension on the scissors. I felt like I had rarely seen that before, right? Oftentimes when you just see maybe new gymnasts coming onto the scene, they have these kind of like, they don't put the effort into kicking their feet up right above their shoulders. And when you actually see it done really well, you think, oh my goodness, that's what it's supposed to look like. And I think one of the things that exactly what you hit on that Rhys does so well is both Gabriele and Hamlet have really beautiful extension, and the way that their bodies, and they extend and clear the pommels, it gives that really beautiful body shape that is not getting deducted right now, because right, they changed what the deduction is, and a lot of the pommel workers in the US are having to change how they circle because what formerly wasn't being deducted now has to be that fully extended rather than the hollow shape.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what those pommel horse specialists do with the event, and like where they try to find the difficulty advantage and what that's going to look like. In the last few years, you've seen the gymnasts, you know, combining zones with flops and all of that kind of stuff. I'm really interested to see where they try to pick up that difficulty, because it does almost look like a little bit on pommel at the moment that the top guys are all kind of have the same routine. So I'm really interested to see how people try to differentiate themselves from the others if everybody does almost have a perfect circle. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And maybe it's a case of somebody coming out and doing unusual skills to set themselves apart a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am very sad that Rhys is not going to be competing at these championships. I really wanted to see how he would look against other athletes and what his routine composition was going to be, but I'm hoping that he is taking good care of himself and his injury right now, and this will give maybe someone else the chance to claim that title that he has taken for so long.
And I'm sure it would give him a lot of motivation going into the end of this year and next year too. And you know, from what you said, having spent a bit of time with him, he's certainly that athlete that would relish the challenge of, okay, now I've got to step it up to the next level to try and beat this new guy that's come along. So I think all it does is ignite that fire and that inspiration within him. Let's move on to vault and rings then, Kensley. Rings for me is almost a battle of the old timers. You know, you've got Petrounias, Courtney, Adam Azil. They've been around for a long time. You know, with these 8 skills, I think it's on rings. We've said for a long time, right? It almost comes down to the landing on the dismount. I think the difference now is that they're having to really push the difficulty of the dismount. They can't just do a back in full out straight or a double tuck. You know, Petrounias is trying to do a double straight. Adam Azil has done that for a long time, and he's probably the most consistent at that out of those two. And then you've got Courtney trying to do the triple back. So I think Again, it's going to come down to, right, who can put this dismount on their feet. And it might not even be a case of sticking it. It might be who is able to take the least amount of deductions on that dismount.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things I've noticed with the change to the 8 skill routine is that while they maybe are increasing the difficulty, I'm going to say like on the rings, they sometimes are not having the gas to do that full difficulty. So we recently saw a Demisile actually have to downgrade his rings dismount to just a double layout, which for him is very, very simple and had a huge hit on his difficulty score as well. And so what I'm sort of going to be watching for, because you've mentioned all the big players and then also maybe throw Nikita Semenov in there as well. Can they do the strength elements to the level that they are used to doing the strength elements? And will they still have the energy at the end of the routine to pull out that big skill? And for those maybe who are newer listening in, right, they've changed the code of points so that the dismount now counts double as the element group. So if you're doing a D dismount, it's 0.4 and then 0.4 for the element group, versus if you do an F dismount, then it's 0.6 for the skill and 0.6 for the element group. So it's a huge differentiation. So that's what I don't think it necessarily comes down to the stuck landing anymore. It's can they actually do the most difficult dismount?
Yeah, and do they take that risk in the qualification of risking that big dismount, or do they actually reduce the difficulty in the qualification, but then maybe take the risk of not scraping into the final? So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. You know, I'm hoping that Courtney can get into that final and challenge. He's looking great. His routine looks great. I saw a training routine the other day. The triple back seems to be quite consistent. You know, it seems like he's got to the end of his career, and the dismount has always been that sticking point for him, and his technique with those dismounts and finding the right dismount. And it seems like maybe actually the most difficult dismount you can do is the right dismount for him. It's, you know, a little bit more straightforward than the technique of having to drop your shoulder and do the twist at the right time. He's great at doing somersaults, right? So yeah, it'll be great to see Courtney challenging, hopefully for the medals and being in that final and just being back in the team. You know, you look at Courtney's career and you look at the times he's missed out on the Olympics, and he could quite easily just kind of walked away from the sport, maybe be a little bit resentful in some ways of not being able to really kind of make that Olympic team and take that final step towards Olympic Games. But he's come back and super motivated. He's a new dad. He seems super happy. And yeah, one of the gymnasts that we spoke about that is benefited from the 8 skills for sure. When we go to vault, for me, the most competitive final that we've got, it's almost like an Olympic final if all the big players get into the vault final, right? It's going to be amazing to see Harry, Jake, Davtian, all of these gymnasts challenging for that vault medal. What are your expectations when we come to the vault apparatus?
I think it's this like stunning contrast between maybe the most consistent vaulter of all time with Artur Davtyan, with Jake Jarmin, who has the most like jaw-dropping difficulty. Like I've never, his Yannick, every time I see it, like my jaw drops just like his did at the 23 World Gymnastics Championships. I can't believe he can twist that fast. It's just, you think it's actually a full twist less because of how clean and how easy it looks for him. And I will be interested in watching to see, is Harry going to upgrade? And one thing I will say that I'm sort of watching in the picture of European Gymnastics Championships is this actually is going to have an effect on the world selection for the US. So they are actually using the difficulty from the European Championships as one of the guides for how they're going to select the team. So I'm looking to see what is the difficulty that people are going to bring to this competition, and is there anyone in the US who can actually match it? And if Jake is doing a 5'6" and a 5'2", the only person who can match that is Asher Hong.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen that combination from him in like 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to see like what is that difficulty that is going to be shown on these events.
Yeah, I mean, for me, outside of this championships, I'm so excited to see Jake and Harry just push each other over the next 4 years. And like, you know, we could really see some incredible vaulting from both of them over the next 2 years. Harry's training a pike drag lesco and a handspring triple twist. You know, Jake's obviously doing his 3.5, and he's also thinking about doing a pike drag lesco. So, I mean, wow, that's just, and the incredible thing about Jake's 3.5 twist is that watching him do it at the British, I realized that vault for him has become normalized because he didn't seem too stressed. He just casually walked off after he warmed up a 3.5 to have got that vault to that level. If he is going to be coming back to challenge and has aspirations in the all around, that is like a golden ticket moment, because he knows he gets to vault and he lands that vault, he shoots straight up that leaderboard. So yeah, it's going to be really, really exciting to watch that. The other gymnast that I really like on vault at the moment and was really impressed with at the Olympics was the Croatian gymnast. Is it Benovic is his surname?
Oh, Aurel Benovic.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Just his toe point on his Dragolescu, the fact that he's a little bit taller, really, really like his gymnastics. And also his floor as well. He might be someone to watch out for on floor. Another gymnast that we didn't speak about that, again, I love his gymnastics. He's such a performer. And like when you think about artistic gymnastics, I think Bertolini from Italy on floor is just, it's amazing. A former world champion. So I expect he's upgraded some of his tumbles, it looks like. So his routine might be exciting on floor too. But yeah, I think...
He's not currently on the
is he not
nominative
on the team?
roster,
That's so
sadly.
sad. Yeah.
But again, that's why it's nominative. But
Okay.
I would be very sad if he
Yeah.
was missing.
Because I mean, his style is just, yeah, it's very unique for sure. But yeah, vault I think will be the most competitive final out there at the Europeans. Let's go on then to the last two events: parallel bars and high bar. P bars is maybe an event that I've not seen too many people standing out on like I have in the past. I think Arakan looks pretty good at the moment. He's obviously got a lot of experience on parallel bars. Is there anybody for you that you're looking for on parallel bars? There was a gymnast last year that I really enjoyed watching in the World Cup circuit that we spoke about a little bit, from Uzbekistan. He had a really nice P-bars routine, though he won't be competing at the Europeans. But there are not too many P-bar workers at the moment that I'm kind of keeping an eye on.
Yeah, Farhad Arijan, I think, has to be considered the absolute favorite for this event. I'm assuming he doesn't falter. I think the title is most likely his. There are a couple of others. So if Ukraine is competing, Nazar Chuperny has to be in that conversation. He has won multiple medals at the World Cup this season and has been very, very consistent on parallel bars. Is sort of kind of taken Illia Kovtun's place within in the ranks. There have been people from a couple countries that we haven't talked about as much. Jermaine Grunberg of the Netherlands actually just recently competed at the Dutch trials and got a 14.45. I have not actually seen that routine, but when I saw the score, I was like, oh, that's something that we need to be looking out for. Interestingly, like Nils Dunkel of Germany, he typically is known for being a pommel horse worker, but his pommel horse isn't come together as much this season, and he's been making finals in other events like parallel bars. So Casali, Lorenzo Casali as well of Italy has done quite well this season, but I think it's one of the more open events. It's not one that I have a lot of expectations on for people to medal.
Yeah, I think P-Bars is going to be one of those events for me where routines really have looked very similar over the past few years, and I'm hoping for, you know, you can almost predict that, particularly if it's going to be a routine coming out of Japan, maybe, but a lot of Europe as well, it's going to be an undersumi half, an undersumi. They're going to do a bavsa, a tipel, and a double front half. And, I want to see some uniqueness, and I'm hoping that upgrading the above bar skills and also upgrading some of the bellas again, we're going to see a bit of diversity of skills within routines on that apparatus. One thing I think we will see towards the end of this cycle is back in full out dismounts from a lot of people. I think that's the way people are going to go. Whether they'll be ready to do that here, I think you'll probably see that a lot from the juniors coming up. I think the junior kids now are starting to train that skill from a really young age. You've got like 12 or 13-year-olds that are doing double backs and starting to twist those double backs. So I think that will become quite commonplace, which is great because that's a really exciting dismount to see. But I think I agree that P-Bars is maybe that apparatus for me where, yeah, I feel is a little bit wide open, and I'm excited and interested to see who performs well. I think for high bar, we spoke about him a little bit. Karimi is probably the favorite, right? I love his routine. His squat half Lukin is just like, he did his squat half Lukin at one of the World Cups recently, and I thought the way he caught it with his chest back in, he could definitely connect it into another catcher. But I was even thinking, somebody like him that catches a Coleman without his thumbs. So when you watch somebody catch a Coleman or a Cassina, they're like two way. You either catch with thumbs or catch without thumbs. And when you catch without thumbs, and I didn't do this, I caught with my thumbs, it doesn't have to be as precise, and you can reach a bit further because you get more reach without putting your thumbs around the bar. When you put your thumbs around the bar, you have to grab. When you don't put your thumbs, you can just kind of like reach and put them on the bar, and you kind of hold on your dowels. Uchimura always used to do this. So if you watch people when you're in Germany on high bar, see if they go thumbs or no thumbs. I was even thinking he could connect a Lukin into a Coleman or a Kovac. Not that we've seen anybody do anything like that, but people are going to start exploring, I think, on high bar. So it's going to be exciting to watch that final. Is there anybody else that maybe I'm not aware of, Kensley, who's doing some exciting high bar work that you're looking out for?
So, like you mentioned, Karimi, I think, is the absolute favorite. Honestly, my favorite routines are coming out of Asia right now between Hashimoto and Tung Jiao Hung's routines. For the Europeans, I think Tavoragal, he's one of the ones of many doing triple back dismount, which I think is becoming more and more standard, but it's something that I still find really exciting, and I hope that I never tire of seeing that dismount. But that's just another routine that I think is well worth watching, and someone who has won medals on that stage before, and I have someone to look forward to.
Amazing. Kensley, it's been a great episode. I'm super excited that you are going to be out in Germany and you're going to be there watching the live gymnastics. That's one thing I really enjoyed from being at the British Championships, just watching gymnastics live. So have the best time. What would you say, just to finish, if there's one routine you're really looking forward to watching, or one of the competitions, the events you're really excited to watch live, which one would it be?
It's Luke's floor routine.
Okay.
I feel like I'm putting too much pressure on him, but that is the routine that I am most looking forward to see, and am hopeful that he can. I love when gymnasts can break history. So
amazing. Yeah, I'd agree. I think I was shouting at the TV last summer when he did his floor routine because I generally was like, "Oh my God, he's gonna win gold! Like, this is amazing." So for him to maybe put that right. And perform that routine again, it'd be an amazing, an incredible achievement. It already is. To have won 2 golds back-to-back on an apparatus like floor, which is very unpredictable, is an amazing achievement. But yeah, that'll be really cool. I'll definitely be looking out for that one. And maybe this mixed team will be interesting. I'm interested to see how that plays out. But have the best time, Kensley. Thank you for joining us again. It's always a pleasure. And just to finish off, where can people follow the coverage and also the work that you'll be doing over this time period if they're interested in following the European Championships and the build-up?
So you can find our website, neutraldeductions.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitter, Neutral Deductions. I think actually Twitter is my personal Kensley Ann. And then on YouTube, I will be uploading interviews for as many people as they will allow me to interview in Germany. And hopefully we'll get some good content headed your way.
Amazing. Kensley, thank you. And I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yes, thank you so much.
The European Gymnastics Championships are where reputations are made. From the team at Turn, we wish all the athletes the very best. Your dedication and passion inspires future gymnasts all around the world. From the training hall to the podium, Turn has got your back. Let's raise the bar together. Visit turn-gymnastics.com.